But coming up next, we've got an interview that I did with Algernon Cornelius a couple of weeks ago. And in it, so for those who don't know, he's a rapper. He's been performing on like the Leeds scene. Now he's moved to Manchester, performing on the Manchester scene. He's been making different types of music for a long time. Most recently, in most recent years, hip hop, sampling, beats, and now rapping. And he's just dropped a couple months ago his debut album, The Miraculous Weapons of Clark is Dark. And you can get that on his Bandcamp. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about his influences. We're going to talk about his creative drives and the way he gets through creative blocks. And we're going to talk about the things that resonate with him as a Taurus. So yeah, that's coming up now. Keep it locked.
No blacks, no Irish. But every dog has its day, so let me shit on this island. Whatever the Moors blessed, I'm more or less descended from the best. Heaven sent and represent to the fullest. If confidence is a practice.
I'm Algernon Cornelius. I'm a rapper and producer, musician, based in Manchester, used to live in Leeds. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
How did you come to the name Algernon Cornelius? Like, can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, that's my granddad's name on my mum's side. So I just thought it was like a weird name for a Jamaican man. So I think it was at a time as well when like rappers were starting to pick more like less grand names and stuff and just sounded like real people. So I think, yeah, it just sounded right at the time, I think. I think that was like 2011 or 12, I think, when I picked that name. So yeah.
I might be mistaken, but I think I read somewhere that your granddad makes music or used to make music, and it's part of what's influenced you basically musically as well.
Yeah, well, like that's on my dad's side. My Irish granddad, he was a musician. He like played trombone, violin, guitar, like loads of other brass stuff, like played in a silver band. And like I like inherited some of his instruments. So he was kind of like, yeah, that was my gateway into like learning music, was through him.
So you started as a instrumentalist, someone who was playing instruments. What instruments were you playing?
I think first one I played would have been guitar, I think, after giving up violin maybe for 2 days or something. And then trombone I like learned for years, and then I didn't like ska, so I gave up trombone. And then went back to just like playing bass and guitar, and then just getting into playing in bands, really. So yeah, guitar and bass is kind of like my main thing.
Are they things that you still play, or when you made did you make a transition into hip hop and sampling and rapping?
I guess like it kind of moved as I was a teenager. It was like, I guess with the thing with trombone, it wasn't cool to me to play trombone. So I was like, I want to play guitar. But then I got interested in hip hop. So I was like, I want to learn how to DJ. And then that moved on to the production side of things. So I think that's how I got into that. But then I still like keep all this other stuff on. Like I kept guitar and bass, and like I played trombone on the last album because my friend ended up giving me a trombone. So I was like trying to learn how to play it again, and like can play it very badly now. So I put some of that badly played trombone on there.
Is this on the new record, Miraculous Weapons of Clark is Dark?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been spending the past few days with that record and absolutely love it. There's like
Nice.
a run sort of from like the second track to like the sixth track is just an incredible run. And yeah, it's really phenomenal. But what's also surprising is, you know, you've been making music for so long, and, you know, I've seen you at various shows and stuff, but this is billed as your sort of debut rap album.
Yeah.
So, like, what is it about this that separates it from all of the other releases, and why an album? Why now?
I think it mainly came as like a practical thing. Like I was doing a lot of shows where I was just playing instrumental music, and I think that was maybe quite limiting. And I started off rapping before doing anything, before making music, like just writing. So then I gave that up after a while, learned how to produce, and I wanted to come back to rap because it felt better to just, I don't know, have that energy as well, being able to talk to people in that way. So I think it just came out of necessity and a practicality, really, and just wanting to have a different type of energy, I think.
And this album, has it been in the works for a long time?
I feel like the idea to make a rap album was in the works for a long time, but I didn't think it would be this album. So like I knew I needed to do it, but I didn't think it would be done in this way. And I think it just sort of, the idea came to me in a couple of weeks of how it should sound or how it should be, I think.
You said you were rhyming first before you were doing the production side of things. What were you rhyming at first? What was influencing you, and what kind of rhymes were you rhyming, basically?
The first rap group that I got into was Run DMC. So it was just like copying Run DMC lyrics, like pretending that it was weird because like where I grew up, there's like no culture at all. So like if you get any piece of culture in your hand, it's like you're there. You don't have anything to take you out of that little space. So it was like I was in the 80s listening to hip hop. So just imagining I was there. So it didn't matter if I was like trying to copy Run DMC, which was completely out of time, like in the early 2000s. But then, yeah, I guess like getting into stuff like Wu-Tang, where that was like, where it kind of like took me into like a much deeper way of writing lyrics, I think, and just like way of using the English language, definitely.
So where do you tend to write when you're writing for a track in specific, or if you're just writing for the sake of rhyming? You know, is that something you're doing separate to the rest of the music making process? Are there certain places you enjoy writing?
It's changed and varied like so much. Like it used to just be on like pieces of paper when I was younger, and then it moved to like books, and then I filled up loads of books and then started doing it on my phone. But I think now it's just like whatever's there at the time. I think, yeah, it could be either if I've made the track first and then I have to write lyrics to it, or if I'm just writing the odd line down in my phone in the notes app or whatever, and then it sort of like comes together a bit later. So it's kind of just like when and whenever, it's just floating about in the ether and then trying to get it down and then bring it together at the end.
You say you used to do it in books. Have you still got those old books? Do you pore over the old writings much?
I've got like, like behind me, there's a cupboard with like a stack of books, which I don't really look at anymore. I guess because it's quite cringe, like just having years of stuff, looking back at your younger self. But like I write in a way where I can't really read what I've written. So it would just take me a long time to decipher what the actual words are. But yeah, I think it's interesting to look back and then see like elements of things that are still relevant now or stuff that I use now, I think. Yeah. I think I've tried to get back to writing in books because it's very different energy to sitting in front of a screen or being on a phone. Like it's more automatic. Like you don't stop to think how a word looks, or you don't edit as much. It tends to be like more natural, I think.
In terms of energy as well, I wanted to ask about the energy. I guess there's a parallel here between, you know, the permanence of having written something and also the permanence of having spoken something when performing live. I wanted to ask about what you find the sort of main differences when, you know, you're in a booth recording for a track and when you're actually performing live and everything has to, well, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's about the energy you bring in, right? Like, what's the different sort of energy you have in the booth and on stage?
I think it's quite tough, and it's something I'm still learning how to do, because I think I'm still in a stage where I'm learning how to use my voice. And I think I've worked out I have 3 different voices. Basically, there's like a quiet voice, the high-pitched, like sort of soprano, and then like a more gruff, aggressive voice. And like it's hard to do the quiet, intimate stuff live. It just doesn't translate. So yeah, it's definitely like a completely different energy. And then learning when and how to use that, like in a live set, and then bring the energy into a more controlled way in the studio. I think that's something that I'm still learning how to do. And like, yeah, I think sometimes there's even this thing when you're playing live, it's easier to have like a moment where the words can actually mean something in the context of like being in front of people. Whereas you're in a studio, you're just like there in a room with nobody apart from the engineer. So it's like, it's almost harder in the studio to recreate the authenticity of those words, if that makes sense.
So speaking of the, I guess the 3 different voices, you mentioned that one's sort of a more gravelly tone. I wanted to ask about the textures on the record, because texture seems to be like not only a really important part of the record, but also just a really pertinent part of the listening experience. There's a little bit of, there's the sort of hip hop sampling sheen. There's a little bit of the sort of DIY sort of funk going on. There's like the noise roughage going on. How have you come to these textures, and how important is that for you when you're putting together these records?
Like, I would say that's like the most important thing is the texture. And I guess I don't know if it's because I listen to music so loud and it just feels like it's scraping across your face. So like, that's always the thing I'm going to be thinking about, because the speakers are like a feet away from my face. But yeah, I think that there's like the main things I think about is like the color and the texture, and how you juxtapose those different things moving from track to track. So it's like giving you these different experiences, I think. And I guess like all the palette of all the different types of music I listen to, it's just naturally going to have that like varied texture and tone and color.
So this might be a spoiler for people listening to the album, but there is a hidden track at the end.
Yeah.
And it scared the hell out of me when I was like, oh, cool, I'll hit play. And then I just forgot. And then it came back on and hit me like a slap in the face. It was great.
That's what I was hoping.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that decision, and also just because it's quite like an old school thing, I guess, from old school forms of media, how come the hidden track, and also are there any sort of favorite hidden tracks that you've got from other albums that you listen to?
Yeah, but I think that's why I did it, was because like I just remember having CDs. I'd just be sitting there, and then there'll be like something at the end, and like Nevermind by Nirvana has that was it Endless Nameless, I think, at the end of. I thought it kind of came from that, because I kind of thought Beyond Time was kind of like a slight nod to Something in a Way. So I thought having like that big gap at the end and then like a track is kind of like a nod to that, really.
I guess I want to just ask, the classic, what are maybe the 5 most important records to you in your collection? If you could only hold on to 5 of them, what would they be?
I have to like look at them now. Definitely the Arthur Verocai record I've got. I forget the name, but I think it's maybe self-titled. I've got like a Brazilian section down here. Yeah. This Arthur Verocai record, which there's no skippable tracks on that. It's like just pure perfection. I think MF Doom sampled this as well, and I sampled it on my first like beat tape I did. I would say like Double Nickels on the Dime by Minutemen, definitely. One of my favorite bands. I spent like an hour on Google Maps trying to find the exact location of that cover.
Did you find it?
I think I did, like roughly where it was. I think a lot of the signs have changed. Like Mad Villain, definitely.
Is that your favorite Doom record?
I think maybe. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, I think it's Madlib and Doom, so it's like is the pinnacle of both. Like I won't say it's like they got worse after that. They didn't, but like I don't know, it's just a weird nexus. They just hit at that time and was just like made beautiful music, and yeah, just all the samples, everything in that. I've definitely ripped off that record about 100 times, like with different beats and stuff. Sell the record, definitely. I'd put that in there. How many was it? 5, you asked. Birds of Fire by Mahavishnu Orchestra. That's like just straight bangers all the way through.
What kind of stuff is that?
It's just pure prog fusion. John McLaughlin, who played with Miles Davis. Who else is in there? Like basically, the Mars Volta ripped off Mahavishnu Orchestra. That's all on there. I can't remember the names of all the players. Billy Cobham on drums. You got Jan Hammer playing the Moog on there. Yeah, it's just beautiful jams. But I've like worn out that record so much because it's my favorite.
So of those 5 records, how many of them have you sampled?
So I've only maybe I've only sampled 2. I've sampled Arthur Veracai and Zelda, definitely. Oh wait, no, I've sampled Minutemen loads because there's like a couple of drum breaks on there. Yeah, and also it's got the theme for Jackass on that album.
Hi, I'm Johnny Knoxville. Welcome to Jackass.
3, 2, 1, fire!
What was the first record you ever sampled, and what was it that made you actually like go into sampling? Because of all the hip hop production stuff, you know, there's like different avenues you can go down, but you went down the sampling route. What was the first one and why?
I can remember the first thing I sampled. So like, really, the first thing I tried to sample, it wasn't sampling, it was just playing it on the keyboard and recording it, which was the theme from Trans-Europe Express by Kraftwerk, but via Planet Rock by Afrika Bambaataa. And then I tried to make a beat on a tape by playing that on the keyboard. And then I think the first CD I sampled was like No Strings Attached by Roots Maneuver, and then put like a Public Enemy instrumental drum beat underneath that. But like records, like vinyl, I can't really remember. It might have been, I think it was Vangelis, the soundtrack to, what's the one where they're running?
That's the
I think there's a track on there called, it might be Jerusalem, maybe, and it's got like a really just floaty synth sound on there. I made like a track with that, but then I ended up sampling myself off that track to make another track that I did, which I can't remember what it's called. It's on like one of the instrumental albums, but yeah.
So how do you know, I mean, you've mentioned drum breaks already, but like, how do you know when you're listening to a record? Well, firstly, are you listening to records to sample, or do you just sort of have the inspiration, and B, when you're listening, how do you know that you want to sample it? Like, how do you know there's a moment that you think, I can use this, I can do this differently?
I don't know how to explain it. It's kind of just like, I think it changes the more you listen and the more that you make music. You have different ideas of how to flip something. Like it started with drum breaks, because I basically like, when I was making music on Ableton, it's like, okay, I need a drum break to use to make this hip hop track or whatever. So I like studied all the drum breaks on YouTube, like would watch playlists people have made of like classic drum breaks, record them all, and then like just know them in my library by name. And then I would end up like seeing stuff in record shops. So then that would get me interested, like, oh, I've got the actual vinyl of that drum break now. And then somebody told me that if you look at a record, you can see when there's a drum break in it, usually by like the density of grooves. So like it looks lighter when there's like less music in there. So like if it's at the start, it could be a drum break, it could be like a solo guitar or whatever. But like those were little markers for when I was trying to like look and find stuff. And then just like, I don't know, it's weird when we put a record on and then like you just hear it, you just like hear the thing. And it may even just be informed by like other hip hop music that you listen to, or you just like feel a groove in it where you could know that you could flip it, or it could just be like half a bar, 1 bar, or like a whole phrase or whatever. It's just like based on whatever your instincts are, really. But it's like almost like a magical moment when you hear it, and then you have to press stop and then like plug everything in and like sample it in.
When you're going back and listening to some of the records, specifically, obviously, like, you picked out some favorites that you sampled before as well. When you're listening back to those records, do you find it easy to separate them from the ways in which you sampled them?
I don't know, it's like, it almost becomes like a third thing, or like a completely different thing altogether. Sometimes I do wish I could like listen to music without thinking, oh, can I sample that? Because it's like, it's almost like having a switch that won't switch off. Yeah, like I don't know if it's just that's how I hear stuff now, but yeah, I have records that I just enjoy listening to. I think there's kind of like 3 things I go for. It's either like stuff that I would potentially DJ with, stuff to sample, or stuff that's just good to listen to, really. It depends on what mode I'm in that day I'm in the shop, really.
What are your DJ sets like?
I've not done that many DJ sets with vinyl, like only a few, but like it just tends to be, I think I just try and like mix as much stuff as possible and like connect the dots between things. So like if there's a movie soundtrack thing that can like go into like, I don't know, some weird electronica from the 70s and then move that into a grime track, then I'm very happy to do that. It's kind of like, yeah, I think I said the other day, it was almost like, it's like dominoes, but like trying to, what's the most ridiculous route you could connect things and make people see that how they were connected, but like have that element of surprise people into thinking they didn't know they could dance to something, and like sort of change how they think about the music, I guess.
That's quite cool. Yeah, I'll need to catch that sometime. I was going to say, given how many influences your music itself draws from, I'd be surprised if you were like a one genre DJ,
Yeah. But sometimes it doesn't work though. Sometimes like you'll Like I've had it where I just like play some weird shit and then somebody will be in my ear like asking me if I've got any Drake or if I can play something off their phone. I'm like, it's not that kind of thing. But fair enough.
For the moments that don't go so well, and for maybe some of old lyrics that you say, there's a bit of cringe in some of those books maybe, and and I can relate because as a DJ I've tried a lot of blends that just haven't worked in front of people, and you just have to not get too wrapped up in failures, I guess. But I wanted to ask, like, how important would you say failure has been to sort of like the artistic journey?
Like, just crucial. I can't imagine it without failure. Like it is. There's like a quote about art being failure, or like at its core. I can't remember what it is, but yeah, like even like mentioned it in the lyric in Gentrify Me, one of the tracks, where need a space to fail, which is what like all these DIY spaces are, or like when we put on our own shows where people DJ, it's like we're expecting ourselves to fail at some point, but it's like a space for that to happen, and like that's what the art is. It's like no one's expecting this perfection. Like we're moving within this space of failure, like sequentially, and just enjoying it as it is, like for what it is, really. And like I think that's the only sort of space where there's anything new, is like a space of failure in a way, like, or to meet what certain conservative expectations may be of certain art forms. But yeah.
You touched on it a little there. I wanted to ask, you've been across both the Leeds and Manchester scenes now. What's been the most important things that these communities have sort of brought to you in terms of your development as an artist?
Just like a community or camaraderie, or just like knowing how to do things and like sort of treat other people, and like the things that you actually want from society, even like that's quite a big thing. But yeah, I think like when I think about when we were younger playing in bands, and you would end up playing Battle of the Bands or like pay to play gigs, all these really shit things that were quite exploitative, and then you discover like a DIY scene where like, oh wait, you can put on your own gig and it doesn't have to be exploitative, and like you can make it work. You don't even have to like pitch it to anybody or ask anybody's permission. You just go and do it yourself. And then on the other side of that, like the DIY clubs, when I was going into clubs, and it would be like a really horrible, toxic environment where you were kind of like quite scared actually to go out into these places. And then people be like, oh no, we don't like that. We're going to change how that is and make people feel safe. We're going to play music that actually we like. So yeah, it's just like having a completely like different worldview, and like how you can come together to like actually make that happen.
I guess that's another thing you touched on already, but if you could go back to maybe the start of when you were getting into playing music, if there was like a piece of advice you'd give yourself, have you thought about what that might be?
I think I thought about this the other day. Like, I think just saying like whatever you're doing is enough. Like it doesn't like to not. It sounds cheesy to say, but not conform to what other people are telling you what to do. It's just be your weird self and not like feel like you have to fit into any of these categories that are being told that you should, because it's all bullshit. It's like you should just, envision your like weird little ideas and like let it grow.
You're dropping gems for all the creatives and the artists out there. And while you're doing that, I'm going to ask you for another thing in that vein, which is, creative blocks. How have you faced them and how have you gotten past them?
I have like creative blocks all the time. And I guess just trying to change stuff up. I mean, it's been quite hard being in the same place for so long over the past year. And like in this house in particular where I'm at, this is the longest I've ever lived somewhere. I like used to move every year when I lived in Leeds. So I've like lived in about like 12 different houses. But like just trying to switch things up, like going for walks, like just being around people again, which has been hard in the past year, just like trying to change my viewpoint or like the way my body feels, or just taking yourself out of a bubble, and then it will come to you. Like it feels like it's never going to come back, but it will do.
There's a lyric on the record about you being a Taurus, I'm pretty sure. And I just wanted to ask, like, are you into astrology and do you relate to being a Taurus at all?
Like I didn't, like I kind of like would laugh at anything that was like horoscope related, but then I started getting more interested in it and I kind of just saw it as like, I guess with anything that's like language, it's just like symbols, signs, like just connecting these images and ideas. That's all it is. It's just like little framework. So then, I think I basically implemented the Taurus, the snake and the crab as like symbols for this album, and then kind of like how they relate to each other and like can clash and be helpful to each other in different ways. So like the Taurus, I guess I see as like the stubborn bull, which I am very stubborn. Apparently like to eat a lot as well, I've heard, Tauruses. Which is very true. And like to relax and, have lots of naps.
I mean, this was going to be some of the things I was going to ask you about, actually, just very typical attributes and traits of Tauruses, or these things that people attribute to Tauruses.
Yeah. I mean, I did just buy myself some new trainers, which I haven't done in a while, actually. So, I do I like being luxurious in different ways. If it's related to food or like, I think it's mostly food, really. If the food is luxury, I'll go for it. I tend to, I go back and forth between thinking if I am a perfectionist or not, because I think on the one hand, I'm quite happy for things to just be raw as they are, like quite open, but then I think I'm quite into details. So I think I'm a perfectionist on my own terms, I guess, which isn't always perfect for other people. Stability and consistency, I would say I'm very inconsistent. But I was thinking about this yesterday, actually. I think there's kind of like a thing where artists feel they have to be quite consistent with their output and like, sort of, I guess, like dress it for people in a way that is almost like quite Instagram ready. Where it's like, this is my brand as an artist or whatever. It must be consistent so people know who I am. Whereas I can't really be bothered with that because it's quite a lot of upkeep. So I don't know if that's where the laziness comes in to that. But yeah, stability I definitely think about more as I'm getting older. Like trying to think about things more long term, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you for joining us, and thank you for sharing your time and sharing your wisdom and sharing your tunes as well.
Thanks for having me.